Good afternoon, good morning, and good night from wherever you are in the world. This is PNR for Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. I'm your host, Rob Akampora. And all I can tell you is, boy, what a week we've had. How we're going to dive into all this in a certain amount of time? Well, we're going to give it a try. As I'm bunkered in here on the Jersey Shore, we bring in our panel of experts. First, from the other part of New Jersey, my cohort in crime, who I'm normally with, but for another week we're apart. God help you, Annabelle. I think you're feeling a little easier that I've got a little bit of a separate micro studio.
Yeah, Rob, how are you today? Everything going good?
Everything's going good. We've got a lot to get into. Coming in from the West Coast, somewhere along the Pacific Standard Time, is our man, Thor Sandalwood. Thor, I'm going to throw to you in just a second, so stand by. And then we
Absolutely.
go across the pond into our very favorite man, Rick Paul, who is looking dapper and dasher than ever. And I really have to step up my clothing game. There's no question about it. Ladies and gentlemen, are we ready for what has been one heck of a week?
Absolutely. It has been a heck of a week.
To possibly explain this, Thor, it's the full moon today. How does the full moon play into possibly some of the chaos that has been going on?
The full moon is always an important karmic event. And I have a chart here. I can show everyone where the full moon is happening. Let me pull that up for everybody. Here's a chart of, and we'll be talking about this in a moment. This was the crash, the helicopter crash that happened earlier last week. But let me go ahead and tell you about the full moon. So the full moon in Vedic astrology, it's going to be in the 8th house of Scorpio. Now, I know a lot of our viewers, they're probably familiar with Western tropical astrology. The full moon is going to be in Sagittarius in Western tropical astrology. Okay. But I can focus on both of these themes for a moment. Okay. So, Scorpio, first of all, this represents explosive events, the need for deep healing. So, we're just coming off a week where there's been, and we're going to be talking about this on our show today. We're going to be talking about the ICC possible warrants that are going to be released. We're talking about the Iran helicopter crash. It's like all these events are leading to more, because the energy of the Scorpios, the 8th house, is leading to more explosive events. Also, this is a time of extreme secrecy. So I want you to know that the intelligence services, a lot of what we may be getting may not be the actual truth of what's going on. There's a lot of illusion spun in there.
I'm shocked.
The sign of Sagittarius, which is the Western tropical zodiac, that's going to be relevant in, and this can represent things like religious extremism. So I do want to point out that there could be a focal point coming up this week. Full moons are always important times of karmic unfoldment. So with new moons and full moons, they always represent points of karma, essentially.
Thor, throw in one more thing, that something you've been saying in past episodes as we talk about the eclipse that has happened and how everything in the world is sort of in this, I'll say, shaky phase because of it. So you take an eclipse that we're going through this phase of it, plus the full moon. When these two characters come together, does that play into a lot of the chaotic state that we're going through?
Absolutely. So the eclipse is like a more powerful, if you think about it, a full moon or a new moon, the eclipse is like a amplified full moon. And so the eclipse energies, like when we're thinking about the one that happened on April 8th, that's affecting essentially the next 90 days. So we're still in that window of time. And then the full moon is just like another trigger and another trigger. So we keep adding more energy to the mix. And there's another transit that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes of what I feel is happening with this helicopter crash that happened. And also, we're going to be talking about the attempted assassination of the Slovak PM as well.
Well, since you brought up the helicopter crash, it's a great place to start for this week. And a week that has been full of a lot of things. We start here. Iran's president declared dead after no signs of life after the helicopter crash site a few days ago, as President Raisi and 6 others were found from the fiery wreckage on Monday. So it's raising an interesting question. Was this an accident? Was this an attempted assassination? Where are we at with this? Annabelle, do we have cards laid out? Are we ready?
We're going to get some cards laid out.
All right. No sloppy shuffle here.
There's always a sloppy shuffle. I am going to do a remote view on the mechanics as well while we're doing this. So just to give everybody kind of a brief overview, I use tarot cards to kind of trigger the psychic experience. But one of my favorite things to do is remote view, which we actually go into mechanics or physical bodies or bodies of water. In the case of the submersible that exploded, I went and took a look at that. But we're going to pull some cards on it, and then I'm going to start to remote view on it. So,
oh, it's colorful, that's for sure.
it is a colorful crash. So I know this is not a popular opinion in terms of the tarot readers and other esoteric people that are out there. There's a lot of talk about directed energy weapons, those kinds of things. I have been getting a tube, that there is a tube somewhere in that machinery that literally popped and was spraying liquid all over the place. Now, is that sabotage before that aircraft took off? I don't know. Maybe it could have been. But what I am seeing is that, there was a lack of maintenance that had been done, or almost like a dry rot. It kind of felt like a dry rot in there. I don't know how old the craft was, but it just feels like there was something that just kind of popped off. It was a piece of like rubber plastic that popped off something that was metal. There was a difference in temperature, and it really just felt like it was dry rotted. So I do think that there was an event, and maybe the fog contributed to not being able to correct the mechanical event that happened. So I'm thinking that there is not a whole lot of subterfuge that went on with this. I think it was just a mistake. Unfortunately, when we get this Nine of Swords, I do think that they knew what was happening. I think they were aware of the event, that hey, we're going down. I think they were aware of that. So that's unfortunate. I mean, I know that Racy was deemed the Merchant of Death once upon a time. He got that moniker. You would like to think that everyone has a nice, easy exit from this particular incarnation, but I do think that there was a bit of alarm on the inside of that helicopter as it was going down. Curious what my colleagues think.
Rick, I want to get your feeling, because obviously this happened a few days ago. Your first vibe that was coming over you when the news broke.
The first vibe there is I'm this tin hat conspiracy wearing alien that's on my spaceship here watching from above. My first thought was there's been some act of sabotage, but then when I listen into you, Annabelle, feasibly, if you've got a very, very old aircraft and it's not being looked after, then there's all possibility that it could have been an accident. My sense was, as I was sat here just processing the words and the information coming across, was damage limitation. So somebody might have had the idea that they wanted to take this guy out. I don't know, for whatever reason, and now it's kind of like fell into the lap. So it's like scrambling now so that they can put a spin on it. And when I'm looking at all of the cards there, for me, have just got like this surrounding feeling. So I don't feel like anybody's going to benefit out of it. There's, even the people that have got a vested interest in it, they're not going to benefit like they are. So even if they're putting this positive spin on it, there's still a war going on. There's still many other battles to fight. And for me, it's just this feeling of not being clear. So whoever sort of says, well, he's been taken out, he's not being taken out, I'm not getting a very clear feeling with that. I'm just feeling trapped emotionally. I'm feeling stunted. So if somebody has won anything out of it and benefited from it, it's going to be a short victory, because I'm looking at and listening to your teaching, I'm looking at the inverted card there, and I'm just thinking there's going to be no cause for celebration. Nobody's going to come out of it crystal clear. And that card at the end there with the Two of Swords there, I'm just sat there in a state of stalemate and deadlock. So whatever was previously thought, that nobody's going to win anything. So it's kind of like whatever's happened, it's rubbed itself out. So we're back to neutral. So I'm just looking at this, and nobody's going to come out of it shining. So Queen of Cups there, she sat there in that emotional space. So at the end of the day, we've all discussed this off camera. Some people don't like other people for various reasons.
Right.
So at the end of the day, that poor person who's lost their life or whatever they are is somebody's son, somebody's offspring or something like that. So we could just do with sending some thoughts out, whatever the reason for this person's passing is.
Amen to that. Thor, I'll give you the last word on this.
Absolutely. My first intuitive feeling before I even pull up the chart is I do feel like there's definite motivations out there for what we would call WWIII to start. So I do feel the motivations are intense. So all we need is the right the provocative moment to set everything off. And this seems to be, it could have been a potential provocative moment. The timing of this crash seems very strange. I mean, they're probably using these helicopters all the time. They're probably doing state visits. There were 3 helicopters in this convoy. The one that happens to go down just happens to be the one with the president and the Iranian president and the foreign minister. It seems a little coincidental on the surface. I'm going to have to say that right off the bat. But let me pull up the chart. One of the things I want to point out is this chart, by the way, is from May 19th. This is the day of the crash. So remember how we talk about in astrology, we can look at charts like the day of an event to kind of get some information about the energies.
Mm-hmm.
And let me go ahead and draw on it for you a little bit. What you're going to notice is Mars right over here. And you notice that Rahu, they're at this was the day they conjoined. So it's spacing it in the chart, but they're pretty much right on top of each other. It's just spacing it so you can see what 2 planets are there. This Rahu planet right here, this amplifies what Mars is about. So it's like pouring gasoline on the fire. Okay. So we got the Mars energy, which is all about warfare, conflict, explosions, like all types of events like that. And then we have Rahu adding gasoline. Now I want to point out something also. It's in the 12th house of Pisces. This is where the eclipse happened on April 8th, by the way. So all this whole house right here is like on fire right now. In the 12th house can represent clandestine operations and behind the scenes intelligence operations. So I do want to point that out. It's well known. It's opposing the 6th house of conflict and warfare. Could this be an event? And I want to point this out for everybody. They talk about intelligence services, and I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat a little bit. But when someone's disliked, a lot of times, all of a sudden it's a car accident or a helicopter goes down, and it's always some person that is disliked by some sort of group or organization. And these coincidences, they seem to happen. So could there be, even if could Annabelle be right? Absolutely. Could it have been a sabotage? Could there have been a faulty part to put in? Or could we, be something along those lines? You all might remember, I believe it was a year ago or 6 months to a year ago. I forget the name, Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner group.
Yes.
Was going against President Putin. And he mysteriously also went down in a helicopter crash too after that. So it's just something to think about.
It leaves 2 last questions in this whole thing, and defending what you wanted to say, even though we don't want to talk about and put alarm in people's minds about WWIII. But when we start talking about some other things, maybe there's something to that. And when you said that house was on fire, I personally thought Kings of Leon were about to kick into my head. But I don't think that's what that band had in mind with that song. Call me crazy, but that was the thought that came over. With that in mind, it segues beautifully into our next thing, because when you talk about what happened to the Iranian president, we got to talk about the Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, who was shot multiple times back on May 15th in central Slovakia. Now, Prime Minister is recovering, but politics in this region now remain divisive because of what happened. So what does the future look like here in Slovakia? And are we on the verge of, to defend something we just said in the last segment, expanding wars, maybe playing to those 5 little letters, 2 W's, 3 I's. Annabelle, I go to you.
So I've got some cards pulled up here, boys and
Oh.
girls. Yeah.
I don't like the reaction from Thor.
So
We got the devil in there.
yeah, and I think the devil in reverse is very curious in this position. So, you know, when we get this 7 of wands here, so sevens, the odd number cards, 5, 7, those are really unstable energies when we're looking at tarot. The 4, 6, 8, those are more stable, predictable energies. So this 7 in reverse really shows a chaotic instability, and it's amplified by this 5 of wands, which is our war card. So I think the powers that be that are looking for a response to this particular incident are in conflict. I think we have a lot of people that are saying, we got to dial this up. We have to respond to this as severely as, I mean, he was shot 4 times. It really was an honest attempt. It's not like, you know, it kind of grazed by and it was a foolish attempt. They got close enough that it was a very, very close attempt.
It's like the old Carlin bit. He was just suddenly cleaning the gun when it suddenly went off.
Exactly. So I think that the powers that be, the individuals that are involved in this, and I think that the larger leadership of the world that's involved are all in conflict about how to proceed. There is a strong feeling of departing from the norm and to respond in a very, very aggressive fashion, whether or not the powers that be are in agreement with that. This is going to continue to be a conflict in place, and we're going to see more of a dividing line. I know in the US, we have very, very severe lines of politics right now. I think we're going to see very severe lines in Europe and how to approach this particular incident. So underneath, you know, the call for that W word is really there. I mean, people are really saying we got to put that forth. So I leave it, Thor, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Oh, I just wanted to bring up, and I was interrupting there for a moment. Apparently the Slovak, the PM there he was a pro-Putin supporter. So he's supporting what's happening apparently in Ukraine. So I just wanted to bring that up to the viewers so they can know that, you know, this would definitely seem like a provocative action. There's a lot of, you know, when we're talking about Eastern Europe, you know, there's the idea that a lot of them were former Soviet states, are part of the Soviet Union. So there's, you know, and Russia still feels like they're kind of part, you know, that they're kind of like satellite states. And so that's where this whole NATO and, you know, so it's interesting that in the Slovak PM, now, if I'm looking at the astrology chart, I'm looking at the same one that I just showed you all, basically with the Iran crash, because it's close enough. The event, I believe the assassination attempt happened about a week. Was it a week before the Iran crash?
Yeah,
it was recent.
PM, just to give the information again, the Slovak PM was on the 15th, and Iranian's president was within the last 3 days.
Okay, and that actually coincides with the Mars transit, through Pisces again. You know, clandestine operations. It's in the 12th house. We have this full moon in Scorpio that we just talked about. 8th house. You know, the 8th house and the 12th house are both houses of intelligence agencies and clandestine operations. Even, for example, they can represent even things like demonic activity. And, you know, are people being influenced by unseen worlds? Are people being influenced by demonic activities trying to exploit you know, the negative feelings on this earth and you know, feed on those energies? Even we can get pretty esoteric with this stuff, but the 12th house also represents things like phantoms, demons, and ghosts, just like it represents clandestine operations. So we're getting into some murky waters with all of this.
This is turning into an episode of the X-Files. Is the truth really out there? I'm telling you.
Absolutely.
Rick, I'm going to give you the last word on this, please.
Well, I'm sat there looking at them cards, and I'm not an alarmist by any means. You know, I've not survived the job that I did by going into panic mode. But my way of working and interpreting things is to imagine throwing a tennis ball out into the universe, and it comes back with some information on it. my gut feeling when those cards got turned over was I suddenly felt sick. I just felt this element of distress in the pit of my stomach of people not knowing which way to turn. There's a real sense in my mind of divide and conquer with this, with these readings here. And I've only just over the last few months since I met Annabelle started looking into reversals more, because I don't tend to work with reversals because it doesn't come up sort of topic specific. But when I'm looking at those, I'm sat there thinking, I've just got this image in my mind at the moment of two big dogs out in the backyard, see who can pee up highest up the fence. So it's like jostling for power. And when Thor was talking, I just got this thing going through my mind that it's kind of like who's recruiting, you know, and I don't think there's any set sides at the moment. I think there's such a divide there. It's who puts the most compelling case. At the end of it, and this is where my sort of feeling of it is, there's going to be massive bloodshed over it in some way or another, whatever you believe in, whatever side of the fence that you're sat, and humankind as a whole is not going to benefit. But whether we're talking the letters and the numbers that we were talking about earlier on, I'm not entirely sure. But when I get to that deadlock again, I'm feeling really, really trapped and kept in this confined space. And it's humanity is going to take some time to recover from this, whatever happens. And that sword, the Ace of Swords card, for me, the way that I interpret it when it comes out, is ultimately triumph over adversity. But because it's in reverse there, I'm thinking, no, I'm not seeing any clear end to anything. And when we're talking about how long that this could potentially go on, I'm feeling here like 2-3 years, and a tremendous humanitarian loss. So I'm not trying to put any frighteners on anybody. This is purely based on my reaction and my feelings when I sat there with it. And, it's unpleasant. I'm going to be honest with that one. It's unpleasant.
Well, to try to go on a more positive note here, Annabelle, you made a comment before we get to the next topic about the odds and the even numbers in tarot, which I wasn't familiar with. But to give an interesting comparable, in the world of craps, if you were to throw craps at like in a casino, when you throw a 3, that's called craps. That's an odd number. You throw 7 most times, you're going to lose with 7. That's a losing number if you're not getting the point. So in comparison to the world of craps, odd numbers come out less frequently and more times losing than even numbers. Thought that was an interesting fact.
And that is, Rob. And, one of the things with Rick getting into reversals in tarot, I have certain decks that I don't read reversals at all just because they're beautiful. And intuitively, after 35 years, I know what direction the card's going. But when I teach tarot, I teach my students that every card actually has 6 different meanings. So upright, we have an increasing energy, a stable energy, and a decreasing energy. And then in reverse, we have a decreasing, stable, and increasing. So there's actually 6 different meanings for every card.
You just exploded Rick's head. You just killed Rick's head. Don't do that.
But I tend not to look at the odds and evens as winners and losers. The odd cards just show shifting energies and maybe discordant energies, but not necessarily losing energies. When I do teach the numbered cards, the pips, we call them, or the minor arcana, I teach them like we're building houses. Okay. And so, when you get a 4, you're putting the ground level on. When you get a 6, you're putting the second level on. 8, you're putting the roof on. It's an interesting concept as a novel way to teach it, and I think it's pretty comprehensive. But I wanted to just bring up one more point about the incident that happened, and not to tie it into Franz Ferdinand. Those of us who know our history, Greg and I, my husband and I, had a discussion about it, and he said the difference between World War I and any incident that may happen in the future is that it really was built upon territory and commodities and those kinds of things. So, we had a pretty involved conversation about how commodity has now become ego somewhat with the information superhighway that we're all on. Right. So, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I don't have a good feeling about Europe. last year we were going to start planning a trip to Oktoberfest. For 2023. And I said, you know what, with everything that's going on in the let's not do that. Let's kind of stand down for a little bit. Just had an uncertain feeling about traveling to Europe and doing 5 days of drinking and pretzel eating. So perhaps we'll be there next year. I'm hoping next year will be a little bit different, but we'll have to see. But I do have a very uneasy feeling about Europe. I think people are getting very extreme. I think they are getting very deep in their opinions rather than in their progressive treatment of the states. So that's just my opinion.
Good stuff, panel. And it also goes to show you only Annabelle could actually give you the history of Franz Ferdinand. All I can tell you is they were a great band in the last 20 years. Take me out. Moving to the next topic.
That's okay, Rob, because I was wondering who Stevie Ray Vaughan made mad, and that's why his helicopter went down. So
Rob, I just wanted to add that I just keep having this vision of you at the craps table, blowing on the dice and saying that you need a new pair of shoes.
My problem is I fall for the sucker's bet every time. I want to throw the hard 8 at 8-1. I'm going to throw the hard 6. See, even numbers. Moving right along. There was a speech that came out within the last week that definitely caused a little bit of chaos. It was at the graduating class of Benedictine College, where Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker talked about embracing traditions. Now, in one part of the speech, he did say, for women, the highest purpose is to stay home and have kids. Now, what's interesting about the speech, it is spurred on a lot of response on two sides of the aisle, with certain people defending on one, certain people defending on the other. We've seen the likes of Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam bash the kicker. We've seen Patricia Keaton from Everybody Loves Raymond defending him. We've heard members of the Kansas City Chiefs saying they have their back, but yet the NFL has distanced themselves from any of these comments. Now, mind you, this was a speech that was done at a private university. It became public, and he has the right to his opinion. But Annabelle, as we go to the cards, I'm trying to see what the backlash is going to be, especially not only for him, the football team, and also keep in mind, he brought up Taylor Swift during the speech. Somehow you don't mess with Taylor Swift in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So, full disclaimer. Okay. I do think as a wife and a mother, I do think that is the most important job. And I'll quote Jackie Kennedy on this. If you bungle your kids, what else are you going to bungle? That was the paraphrase, but she did say bungle your kids. Don't bungle your kids. I do think that it's a really important job that has been outsourced to a certain extent with the advent of two income families. So this is an editorial on my part. I was discussing with Rick beforehand that, when I was a single mom, I had the option to do a different job, but it would have required me to come home when my children were asleep. At the time, I was doing a certain position in corporate America where I was coming home. My kids were already washed and fed and in bed, and I would get to see them for, a half hour or so. And it was all in the spirit of, creating a great life for us. Given the choice, if I were given the choice to stay home and just raise my children, I would choose that. So I am trad wife leaning, with still the option to have an internet psychic business or what have you.
If you allow me to interrupt for a second, as somebody who's known you for 30 years, it's semi-surprising because I know you are somebody who is motivated to do what you do in this world. And you are somebody who's a very creative person. So you still say, I can be creative, but I'm still going to do family, kids. That's going to come first, everything else second. And if I can balance both, fantastic.
Sure. And that really is, where I'm kind of, Rob knows me from the days of like, I ain't going to listen to no man.
Very much.
But, I do think, as you get older, that, your priorities do change. And with that comes the responsibility of, men that are, going to take on that role of being the primary breadwinner, et cetera, et cetera. So, and to be sure, like it goes either way. If you want to be a progressive husband and stay home and let your wife go to work and make all the money, that's totally fine. But I think somebody needs to be at the helm and raising kids. Otherwise, we're outsourcing our parenting, and then you don't know what you're going to get at the end of it all. So, editorial there. Sorry, guys. So let's bring up the card. So what I'm asking is, how is this going to affect Harrison? I think he spoke from the truest point of his person. And this isn't a defense of what he said, but I think that this really is his morality, and really the way that I just spoke about how I feel that parenting is the most important job that you can do. I think that's really where he is coming from. Keep in mind, this is a professional football player who makes oodles of money and has the luxury of saying, honey, you stay home and raise the kids.
Good point.
I did not see anywhere that there was any restriction that he, put his boot or cleats on anybody's neck. So I think the backlash from it really was kind of subcontext. People were trying to read between the lines, like he would force someone to stay home. And I didn't quite get that from the transcript that I read.
Right.
I do think that this is going to affect him professionally, though. I think in terms of, marketability, he's not a middle of the road guy anymore. He picked a side. Who was the football player who would kneel before the games?
That was Colin Kaepernick.
Yep.
No, the other one, the one who would pray.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
You're talking about Tim Tebow, who wound up playing for the
Yeah.
Denver Broncos.
Right. I think, this is going to be like a Tim Tebow moment. I think people are going to be averse to this because they just don't want that kind of religion out on the professional field. I just think he's gonna take some heat from it. And I think the higher ups are gonna say, you know what, let's kind of put him on ice and keep him quiet for a little bit. I don't think he's going to stay quiet about it. I think this is going to be his Kirk Cameron moment. So those of you that don't know who Kirk Cameron is, he was an actor back in the, well, he's still an actor. He didn't stop, but he's very, very religious. I would even say fundamentally religious, and he's a pastor, I believe, in his church. And I think he would hate what I was doing with tarot cards. Just put it that way. I do think that this is going to be a little bit, he's going to be kind of pushed into that corner, Harrison. I think really that's where he's going to be. I think he will quiet his voice on it somewhat, but his religious culture, his church, his people that are involved in that are going to rally around him. He's not going to be on his own. There may be a response statement to this. And I think that his church will back him up and say, yes, we do fully support him. But I think from now on, he may be keeping his opinions to himself because there's going to be some icing down of him professionally. So that's kind of what I see.
And an interesting comparable with Kirk Cameron, because Kurt wound up going on his own. And what a lot of people don't realize, that in faith-based movies, he's got two of the biggest grossing faith-based films in the history of film, which has become a little more mainstream. And this shows you sometimes how things can merge together. Cameron and a couple of others all of a sudden are getting their movies picked up by major corporations because now they see there's money out there. There's money to be made. So as Kirk Cameron stands his principle, he's also profiting from it. So just to get that out into the open.
There's a need for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always going to be something for everybody in this world. And I think that's the interesting part of this topic, where, because I sit there and go, my opinion, he has the right to say it. That's why we have the First Amendment and freedom of speech. But in this country, too, with the right to an opinion. And your opinion and his opinion and somebody else's opinion may differ on so many different levels. But we used to have a time where we could discuss this. Well, right here, we can, which is the other beautiful part of it. Thor, I go to you.
Now, I don't have an astrology chart for this particular event or the person that said this, but I do have an opinion. So was this at I noticed that the podium said Benedictine College. Was it a religious?
That's exactly right.
Private?
It is in the Midwest, Benedictine College. Yes.
It does seem like it's a religious, or at least it's probably founded on some sort of religious principles. It makes sense.
Yes. It is. Absolutely.
No, I'm not defending what he said. I feel like it definitely is tone deaf. I mean, we're not we're not going to party like it's 1666 anymore. But
1699 would have been more appropriate. But anyway.
but I do feel like, I mean, if you consider the context, he's speaking at a Benedictine college, and these places tend to be very conservative. Look, I'm not going to come out as some big supporter. I mean, this is the same group that would have probably had us all, considered witches back in the Middle Ages. So
Ooh, what?
Maybe even now.
maybe even now. But I will say, yeah, I do feel like we're in an age where, and I'm going to kind of segue this for a moment. And this is going to make kind of sense. So back in the early 2000s, you may remember, when we talk about the election of George W. Bush, they talk about the evangelicals helped get him elected.
Yes.
And so they've been a very powerful group in the United States. And that was almost 20 years ago. I feel like the evangelical presence is kind of diminishing, actually. I mean, we had a lot of things as far as, for example, a lot of the issues back then, people have softened up on. So when we, so nowadays it's more dangerous territory to kind of have an evangelical spin or point of view on things. I'm not saying it's wrong, because I do believe in the First Amendment, but I do think it can be damaging for somebody's career, especially if they're a professional football player, to come out. Like I, for example, I don't think we're going to see any more Tim Tebow's and things coming out. It's becoming more and more taboo to kind of come out with these kind of things.
And this is where I go to Rick, who's got his broom out because he's one of the witches of PNR, and a man who, by the way, has no interest in American football. So this ought to get really good.
I'm sat here, and we had quite the heavy topic previously, so I'm going to bring in my humorous side to this.
Please do.
When it all came up, there's a thing over here that's known as foot in mouth disease, where you engage the mouth before you operate the brain. And I've been married for 28 years, and my theory is happy wifey, happy lifey. So that gentleman, whoever he is either brave, naive, or foolish. And I'm not quite sure which one, because I'm just thinking, when he's stood in a room full of people, he must have something that's not quite wiring in properly, because it's, dude, read the room. Because in this day and age, he may well have a valid opinion. It may well have merit, but know when to say it and know when to pump the brakes, because that's just like you were speaking on the earlier one there about adding fuel to the fire and things like that. As soon as you opened up on it, I went, oh. And it's like one of those reality TV shows where you're going, God, I hope he gets away with it. And it looks bad, and I can't look away. This is all going to explode. But a little bit of seriousness with it. Looking at the cards and the question that was asked, will this harm his overall career? I don't think it'll affect him as much as, like, if the likes of us had sort of come out with a comment like that, and we've got sponsors on there. He may well lose some sponsorship there. But the money that he's going to lose, it for me, will be inconsequential. You know, it's not going to be the end of his career, but it may put a little bit of a stain on it. If I was his PR guy or his manager, I'd be just going, right, mate, I think just for a while, duck your head down a little bit, because there's going to be one or two people out there that are going to be gunning for you. So think before you speak. And I'm a fine advocate, because I have a habit of engaging my mouth before my brain gets in gear. So I'm sat there going, oh, well, just on this occasion, thank God it wasn't me.
So I actually have a question. Rob, is he married?
Yes, he is.
He is.
He
Okay.
is a family man with wife, kids. Wife has been very behind his back on this whole thing, without question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, she's only going to argue with him, is she? What did you see in the multimillionaire footballer that's going to provide for you for the rest of your life? Of course, I'm behind him. 100%.
And that's the thing a lot of people don't realize. Even if he's only a punter in the NFL, he's one of the best. He's making millions. So I don't feel bad for the guy. I'm like sitting here going, but also keep in mind something about reading the room. Rick made an interesting point. I think he did read the room. I think he knew the room he was speaking to. What he forgot was, I don't think this is going to go viral. That's the thing everybody seems to forget. We're in a world where everything at any moment could go viral. This show could go viral. We'd be very happy with that. But since we're not, we continue on because we still got more stuff to get into. Annabelle, put up there we go. Thank you very much. She's on top of things. A spokesman for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has been blasted by the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's administration for stating on Wednesday that his country would arrest the leader if the ICC implements a warrant. I mean, could this be the effective end to the end of the conflict in Gaza? Annabelle, you've got some cards to shuffle, triple cut, and now deal. And one day you'll explain the triple cut because when we deal poker, we only cut them twice.
So it's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Thank you.
You know, a lot of people think that tarot is anti-Christianity, standard religion. But the truth of it is that I keep my grandmother's mass card in with my cards. I have a rosary in there.
Wow.
I come from a mixed religious background. My father's Jewish, my mother's Protestant, my grandmother was Catholic. Like, go figure. We have a Hare Krishna in the family someplace. I'm not kidding.
Translation, their holidays are goulash.
Our holidays are super fun. So when I do that cut, it's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. I just make sure that I ask all of those powers that are on high to guide me in the best possible way.
Amen.
So that being said, I did 2 spreads on this one. Netanyahu's on the top. And I want to make sure I say his name correctly. It's Sinvar. Do we say Sinvar or Sinwar?
I'm honestly not sure, and I usually do my homework on that. I'm sorry.
So that's okay, because I could not find the correct pronunciation. I actually saw 2 when I did the search on it. So we'll just say Sinwar and use the American accent manner. So what's happening is the ICC is seeking warrants for both of them for WAR crimes. And I think that this is an effort to cease the escalation of events there. Obviously that's what it's for. Will they be successful in issuing a warrant and also executing that warrant? So here, if we're looking at Netanyahu, they're in disagreement about the fundamentals. So the individuals that are involved here are in disagreement about the fundamentals of whether this is a WAR crime or not. So, obviously Netanyahu feels that he is in the right. He is protecting his nation. He feels that these are the things that he needs to do to protect his people. There is some anxiety about it because of the amount of pressure that is out there. And that's one of the things that I feel, before it rains, when you get that barometric pressure starts to come down on you, Netanyahu is actually feeling that right now. He's feeling the pressure. There are advisors that are telling him to cooperate. It's almost like turn yourself in, go down to the police station and turn yourself in. I think we're going to have some negotiating that goes on behind the scenes about this. I'm not going if he doesn't go. We can meet in the police station and, the proverbial police station, take us to separate corners and process us both at the same time. But I'm not going until he goes. So is this in the best mind? No, not necessarily. Is there a better outcome for Netanyahu? I do think that he's going to get into a more conversational negotiation with the ICC. I think he is going to make an effort to not have this be a huge drama where they go and pick him up and arrest him. Now, Sinwar is a little bit different. The fundamentals, the dictates of Hamas, he is really digging deep on that. He does not want to hear any other opinions, and therefore any arrest warrant is going to be in direct opposition to his goals and his way of thinking. So we are going to see that. However, he will meet with them and have a conversation, but it's not going to go anywhere. I think Netanyahu is more of a diplomat in this sense. He's going to maintain and fight back and have a discussion, but he is not exactly cooperative. This Hamas leader is really not cooperative at all and will go there with non-negotiables in hand. That's all he's got. He's not willing to bend on any of these things. So are we going to see them both issued warrants? I'm going to pull card on that. Tower in reverse and the Queen of Pentacles in reverse. So we'll put these off to the side so we can just see them a little bit better. I think we are going to see warrants for both of them. I think both are going to come out. I think, unfortunately, I think Netanyahu is going to keep opening his mouth a little bit too much. I think he is going to escalate some of the negotiating that he is going to do with the ICC. This individual, I think, is going to just not negotiate at all. Sinwar, I think he's not going to negotiate at all. So that's what I see.
It almost seems like this is this high stakes game of chicken, and the humidity in the room is 98%.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. Rick, what is your vibes on Netanyahu that you've been getting off of him over the last few weeks up until now?
Let's say I'm looking at the cards here again because I don't want to make an ignorant comment there.
Fair enough.
I have very little knowledge about the state of the Middle East and places like that, but it seems to me, ever since I was a little boy, that there's been conflict around that region ever since I can remember. And I'm looking at that, and I remember sort of personalities' names as they come up, but I'm just going purely on these cards because I'm not religiously minded or politically minded or driven in that way. But I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at that card. And the first one on the top line there, I'm just thinking that butting heads keeps coming to mind, that I'm not working in conjunction with anybody. I'll hear you, but will I actually listen? And where I've got the sorrow and despair there, that is sort of saying to me, well, I'm going to keep my own counsel. I'm going to keep my own mind. You may well have a point, but I'm not going to show any weaknesses. And in regards to the negotiations, I'm just not feeling that flexibility. It's one of those where I feel like, oh, if I must, I'll get involved. If I must, but I'll hear you out. But essentially, I'm just going to what I call cock a deafen to it. I'm just going to tune out. It's like the Charlie Brown type of thing with them in the background. Yeah, I'm there. I'm playing it all out, but it's going to be my way at the end. The second line of cards, I'm just going right. I'm not even going to waste my time justifying your existence. So it's almost in my head. It's like, go away, peasants. I'm far too important to deal with any of this sort of stuff. All right, if I've got to. And I think if we got two people there, say I went round as an arresting officer, that you would get less fight from the top guy, and the second guy would be the one that would resist you all of the way. Essentially, he knows that he's got to play ball, because there's bigger things at play than his own opinions and values, but he's going to fight it all of the way. There's no negotiation with him whatsoever. There's no softness, no flexibility. Will the warrants get issued? Yes, I believe. My feeling is that they will. Will it come to anything constructively? That's the bit where I've got my doubts, where I'm going, yeah, okay. I'm just getting this feeling of posturing. You know, it seemed. I loved your analogy there about the temperature and the pressure in the room. Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I feel it. But it's just one of those that there's an expectation from the outside world that nobody's above the law and we need to take everybody to task. But what will it come to at the end of it? That's the bit where I'm just going, a big pile of isht. See, I got that right, Annabelle, this time. Big pile of isht. And that's what I'm going to leave you with.
Yeah, you made it. I love the statement you said. I'm too important to be arrested. It does kind of come across that way, where it's like it's the plot to a really bad movie, and the sad part of it is, you know how this is going to end. In this case, I come to you, Thor. As you take a look at this, do you have a chart for like the state of Israel that we can kind of dissect a little bit?
Yes, that's what I'm going to look at. So one thing I want to point out before I bring up the chart is the U.S. and the state of Israel, they are not signatories to the International Criminal Court. So even if they have these arrest warrants come out, it might amount to basically nothing. It would just be that, and I think some European countries have come out, like Norway. Like, for example, if Netanyahu was to fly there, then he could be exposed to arrest. But otherwise, if he just flew to the United States, nothing would be different, even with a warrant out there by the ICC. Now, let's go put up the chart. This is the State of Israel chart. And one thing that's very volatile right now, I feel like this situation is actually making things worse overall. You got to imagine it from Netanyahu's point of view. Right before the ICC prosecutor came out with all of this, seeking the warrants, some of his cabinet ministers in the war cabinet were already coming out with statements saying that maybe we need to tone this down. Maybe we need to have another plan for Gaza. Okay. So some of them have already been starting to distance. There's been a lot of protests happening in Israel where they want him to resign because of the individuals being held captive right now. So he's under a lot of pressure. Now there's the ICC arrest warrants. Now, will it physically do anything to him? No, but politically, it's a big deal. And what is your mark in history? What is your name going to be known as in history? So in the Israeli chart, remember we talked about Mars. So everything that is happening, and so Mars is in the 6th house of Pisces. We have Rahu in the 6th house of Pisces right now. And then we have, remember, those catalytic events that are happening. We just had the May 18th. I related that to the Iranian helicopter crash. That is important. And then we have May 26th, which is another important date that's coming up in just 3 days now, where Mars is going to be crossing what's known as the eclipse degree. And it's like an imaginary degree where the eclipse happened on April 8th. You'll notice all of this is happening in the 6th house. 6th house represents warfare. It represents disgrace. It represents conflict. If anything, I see this all as an escalation. This is not going to help. I don't think it's going to help bring about a ceasefire. If anything, Netanyahu is going to start feeling more isolated. And you know what people do when people feel like they're backed into a corner and more isolated, and they feel that they are right. You know, I'm actually afraid that there actually might be bigger moves made because he might see that his time in the office is limited. So he might feel that,
if you forgive me for interrupting, do you believe that when we talk about the 26th, that's going to be sort of the leaping point of worse things potentially to come?
Yeah, I think that, for example, and maybe one of my co-hosts here can correct me, but I believe there's been a lot of pushback on the invasion of Rafah. And, this could be that he just decides to go all in. So we're using the casino reference. Maybe he's going to put all his chips in on this because he believes he's right. And maybe that's what I'm worried about. Maybe he's going to do a Hail Mary kind of move because he sees that his politically, the timer is going right now. Most likely,
if we're going to use the gambling reference, like you said, he goes all in. What if one nation calls? Are we on the verge of those 5 little letters again? 2 W's, 3 I's.
That's what we're talking about. And then Iran, there's a lot of little factors here that are stoking the flames of hatred here. So it's a very dangerous time. May 26th is going to be an important date to look at. So even into June, since this is the Psychic News Report, in the June, I feel like when we look at the State of Israel chart, I feel like we're more in an escalation energy, not necessarily a ceasefire energy. And that's what's got me worried right now.
I'll be curious to see what happens when we reconvene next Thursday, then. But while we still have some time, not often we get to do this, but when we have a little bit of time, we like to do something called Quick Hits, where we come up with 2 or 3 extra topics that have made news this week. Anna's going to put out like 1 or 2 cards. I'll go to one of my panelists, get your feel off of it. Anna, which quick hit do we start with?
We're going to start with something that just broke right before the show. I think it was early this morning. Brad Pitt actually won a major part of the lawsuit against his ex-wife Angelina Jolie over the sale of their Chateau Maraval, which is a huge and glorious vineyard in France that they had bought together.
Which
So
means
what had
that,
happened?
you know what that means, though? It means that George Clooney's coming over there with his tequila, and we're all going to have a wild party, baby.
As long as Diddy doesn't show up with his Syrah.
Oh!
Oh,
I went there.
You have the most, I think you have the most knowledge on this. Put the cards out. Give us your take on it.
I sure will. Let me pull this down. So,
You got it.
just to give you guys a little bit of background information, if you're unaware. So, Angelina Jolie, part of their split, they agreed they wouldn't sell the property or their share of the property to anyone else. Angelina went ahead and sold it to a Russian oligarch. Brad Pitt was very upset because he didn't get first right of refusal. He did want to have a say in that. He did want to buy it outright for himself. So this win is Angelina now has to disclose something to the number of 80 non-disclosure agreements. So it's really notable. And her defense, her counsel had said that it was abusive and disruptive to her life to have to be able to disclose these. The judge has now said that she does have to disclose them. So let's see, is this going to help Mr. Pitt? Or is this Mr. Smith? Or is this going to help Mrs. Smith? Let's call him by those
To
names.
quote the movie, yes, indeed.
So maybe we should kick it over to one of my colleagues on this one before I fire off.
Look, Rick is probably sitting there going, Angelina Jolie, who cares? Brad Pitt, he has no interest in either one of them. So, you know what? That's why I'm going to go to Rick.
Yeah, I'm sat there, and the Sun card is the one that draws me because that's the ultimate sort of nurturer and sheds a light on things, brings things into being. I'm looking at those cards, and I've gone with a gut feeling because I'm not sure about the influence of the card in reverse there. I'm not 100% sure. It's not calling to me, but I'm seeing the one on the right there that practically sat there on my throne there. And we got the King of Wands in a very practical type of way that it's going to favour Mr. Smith, in my humble opinion there, that it's going to benefit him. Maybe he feels like it's been a long time coming because I do feel a little bit that I have watched and bothered to actually take any notice of. He does seem to come off quite a lot of the battles and the discrepancies on the losing battle. So I think this is just like the scales being redressed there. And the plus side is he'll have enough money to either go on a good piss up or drown his sorrow. So either way, it's a win-win for him.
There you go. What I see is the next plot to Ocean's 14, but that's just me.
And to be sure, I wanted someone else to go first because I am a Brad Pitt fan. I'm also an Angelina fan. Like, I thought they were a great couple together. I was really sorry.
So this is your way of kind of skitching out of the question. Nicely done.
No, I'm not going to skip out. But I think with the sale to this Russian oligarch, it really did tie Brad Pitt's hands on the management and the business aspect of that vineyard, because now you have a 50% partner that you don't even know and you haven't vetted. So I think while he was emasculated and rendered impotent in the business, and I am using those references because the wands are a very sexual energy. I think this is going to disclose some of the conversations that were had during the process of this sale. And I think they're going to give back to him. I think he's going to be able to undo that sale or settle up with the oligarch. I think he's going to wind up with full ownership of Chateau Maraval. So I think that that's a good thing. I mean, Brad Pitt is on the wagon. He's a teetotaler as a result of the divorce. But I think, having this passion project that has turned into a real business for him and also a refuge. That was one of the things they both said, was that it was a refuge. They raised their children there. So I think it's important that he stay there. I think it's going to be a really favorable situation for him. And I think he's going to come out on top and he's going to get ownership of that vineyard.
I think it's kind of sad that we've actually had a sentence that went Brad Pitt emasculated. I didn't think that was humanly possible, but it happened.
It's not. Can we talk about Johnny Depp too?
Annabelle, next hitter. What do we got?
So the next hit Let me juggle a little bit.
Oh, of course, babe.
The next hit is the Department of Justice filed some anti-monopoly lawsuits against Ticketmaster and Live Nation. And Rob, you were the one who brought this to my attention. So what else do you know about this?
The news broke probably around 10:30, 10:45 this morning when the Attorney General called a press conference and had announced that the government is formally charging a lawsuit against Ticketmaster / Live Nation for illegal monopoly, that they're saying they own over 80% of the business here in the United States. That now that they're owning venues, they're owning over 60% of the venues in the United States, creating an unfair business practice for anybody else to try to get into the ticket business. They're also accusing Live Nation Ticketmaster of strong-arming tactics against smaller companies, saying that they were given no other choice but to sell to them. This is going to be an interesting thing because the other thing that's come out of this, and it's something that as a person who goes to concerts and all of you, I'm sure, have gone, price gouging. Where does the gouging come from? Is it coming from Live Nation Ticketmaster? Live Nation Ticketmaster is going to kick it back and say it's the artists. This thing is far from we've only hit the tip of the iceberg with what happened today.
So we've got some cards up. I'm going to go to Thor and see what Thor has to say about this, what his instincts are.
First I do want to mention, I feel like, this is the antitrust, laws. I do feel like there's a certain selective enforcement of these antitrust laws. I mean, we do have a lot of companies that are really way too big in the US. I won't mention them, but it's kind of obvious. So I do feel like these are selectively enforced when it's convenient. And we are in an election year, so remember that. So the one thing I do feel, I don't feel like I'm looking at like the Two of Pentacles. I feel like, and Ticketmaster and Live Nation might actually even make the argument of like, well, look at all these other companies that you're just picking on us because, maybe they'll look at some of the tech giants and different people and go, why aren't you going after them? You're going after us. Just why? Because we're just the concert people. I do feel like with this particular reading, there's a lot of stress associated with this. I don't feel like the government's going to get what they want, though. They want to have this kind of notch on their belt of like, okay, we applied the antitrust laws. For those of you that don't know, basically the antitrust laws were created in the turn of the century when you had the big conglomerates like the Standard Oil and these basically really big companies that were basically taking over the whole market and forming monopolies. So the idea was you needed to break up a company because it could corner the market where to encourage competition essentially. But I feel like they're going to be walking away. So we got a couple of cards there. We got the Eight of Cups. Okay. This is kind of walking away disappointed with the results. And then I feel like this might be from the government's point of view. And then we got the Five of Swords. We got like a battle, and that's like a vicious battle. Like Ticketmaster might go, okay, let's go to court. We're going to hire the biggest law firms we know. And we're going to do some battle with you. Let's do this. And I feel like that's what I feel like they might be walking away realizing maybe they didn't have the case that they thought they had.
The way they presented it this morning, Thor, was interesting because they felt very confident. That's the way they were coming across. And of course, that's what they're going to do at a press conference. They're going to basically say, we've got this, this, and this. They even brought in comparables. And Rick, if you want to chime in on this part, please do. They were talking about competition like in places like in Europe, where there are multiple ticket outlets, not just the one company. And what it was doing was creating fair pricing, and no company was being slighted. Everybody was getting a better price, and nobody was losing money. So if they were to present that part of the case from what's going on in Europe over here, is that enough? I don't know. And Rick, I would imagine you've gone to enough concerts just on that level, even if you don't go on your vibes. Just the last time you went to a concert, when you felt like you paid for the tickets, were you feeling gouged? Best way of asking.
This is where, again, I have to bring in my sense of humor. And to my shame, I have only ever been to one concert. And I have no idea how much I paid for that because I was drunk when I booked it.
Who was it?
That is the truth. But when I'm looking at those cards, I'm sat there thinking that the government have took a big bite out of something that they're not going to be able to chew and get full, get that full satisfaction. And I'm just sat there, and the image that's gone through my mind, it's like, ooh, now this looks sparkly. This looks like this is going to kick off big style. So grab us a bucket of popcorn and a bottle of whatever my favourite tipple is, and I'm just going to sit back here and watch this, because I'm not anti-establishment or anything like that, but I do love it when people come stampeding in and just like start throwing the weight around, and then expect everybody to just go, okay, I'll do what you say. And the power behind these two people coming together as that sum total, all of the Ticketmaster and all of the rest of them coming together, I think is enough to overthrow the government in this scenario. So when you see the card of them walking away into that abandoned state and disappointment, I think that's the government. I think they're going to have the trousers pulled down, not in a literal sense, and take a spanking on this one.
I already got the popcorn ready, and I got some apple pie moonshine. I plan on sitting by and enjoying the ride.
I'm going to agree. I want to know what concert it was that you went to, though, Rick.
The Mac Lads.
The Mac, not Oasis? Like, you're from the land of Oasis and Ned's Atomic Dustbin and
Never been to a concert.
Wow. One more reason that we need to bring PNR over to the United Kingdom so that we can go catch a few shows together.
Amen to that. And well, I think, what's the next one?
We've got one more, and this is going to be for Rick too, because Rick brought this up to me. So the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has called for a general election in July. Now, Rick felt a certain way about this, as they say down in the southern states here in the United States. He felt a certain way about it. So I'm going to throw some cards on that, and we'll kick it back to Rick again.
While Annabelle's throwing the cards, before the cards even come out, were you surprised that he wanted this general election to happen?
I just think with him, he's just so... I'm just trying now to just process my words before this torrent comes out. I think he's that far up his own backside that he is just absolutely unaware of what is going on in this country. You know, there's people talking about these big conspiracy theories, and there's this going on in the background and that going on in the background. I think this guy actually believes his own crap. I really do. He's got so much of this going round in his head that he's walking around, shaking hands and patting babies on the head and all of this sort of stuff. I think he actually believes that the people in this country are looking at him and going, oh, you multi-millionaire that's got a wife that's got access to huge amounts of money, and you're not paying proper tax, allegedly, before anybody jumps on me, that we're all going to look at you and go, oh, he's the ideal one to take us out of poverty and lead us into these next few years. So in his addled mind, what he's done is, right, he was unelected. He found himself in there by default, that I'll put out there and I'll give everybody an opportunity to vote me back in because I've done such a wonderful job. And I'm going like this. What the is going on? Because this guy is just, for me, is just plain nuts. And so I have to put this into context, though, because I'm not a voter. So I don't think that you can sort of stand on your soapbox and complain too much if you're not prepared to put your money where your mouth is. Well, but my overall view with anything to do with politics is that if you've got one side and you don't want to vote for that side, you've got to have somebody that's a viable alternative. And my belief system is, just taking that objective point of view, is that we haven't got anybody that is a strong enough opponent to take the country in a different direction. So the Labour leader, which is the most viable second party, whether we like it or not, for me is a watered down version of what Mr. Sunak is. So if you go with that, you're going to get like second-rate policies. But he's a sir at the end of the day. So is he going to be for the everyday man? Is he going to be for the people that's going to put the priorities? And essentially what we all want over here, and I feel comfortable in speaking in this manner, is more affordable, like houses, food, the shopping bill being reduced, the council taxes being brought down to a reasonable level and things like that. Is he the man to do it? Has he got the backbone to turn around and make these bigger decisions? Because for me, we're selling our country down the river. I'm getting on my soapbox here and I'm going to have to stop. I just get so frustrated that in this day and age, when our country is known as having one of the richer countries in the world, that we've got anybody that's having to go to a food bank just to get by. And it's one of those things that gets me really animated, because I don't like to see people suffering. Amen. And unfortunately for me, that looking at this political process, I don't see any signs of it ending, whoever gets in. So I'll hush up now because I feel like I've gone off on one.
The great thing about it is, before you read the cards, it's interesting to look at what's going on over there and what we got going on over here. And I'm kind of going, there's a lot of interesting similarities. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to agree.
Now with the cards, Rick.
Oh, wow. Well, looking at that with that card on the left-hand side, he's going to be victorious.
Oh, no.
And
Perhaps.
I'm looking at the card in the middle there, and he's got the ability to stockpile money, so he's going to be happy days. And the only thing that's going to happen is all of the rest of us poor schmucks over here are going to be in more pain and despair. So,
exactly,
Annabelle, that's it. I'm done. Tarot, you're out today. Oh,
Annabelle, you have done something that has never been done to Rick before. As I went to him with the cards, he actually was silent for 5 seconds in shock. That never happens.
I'm gutted.
It hasn't.
You never put Rick silent. That is never a good sign. Never, ever, ever.
I'm going to disagree, though, because I think that there's going to be a little bit of a surprise there. I think, he's very confident going into this. And I think he's looking at it like, oh, this is going to be great. But I think people are going to have a lot to say about it. Yeah, I think even if he is victorious, even if he does come out on top in terms of votes, I still think that there's going to be a lot of dissent, I shouldn't say dissent because that suggests some wildness about it, but I think there's going to be a lot of people that have things to say about it. So, I think there's going to be a lot of voices like yours, Rick, let's kind of get the show on the road. And are you going to do it? Because you haven't done it so far. So it's just my opinion. Thor, what's your opinion on Rishi Sunak's general election?
I don't have the slide for the show right now, but I do have a rectified birth chart for him, for Rishi Sunak. And I feel like he's going to still win this coming summers when they're having the election, right? Do we know when the date is? Is it in...
someone said July 4th, possibly. Curiously.
Okay. So one of the things I want to point out is I do feel like he's tremendously unpopular. I mean, the country is, most of the Western world right now is in a very difficult spot. I mean, the inflation, cost of living, and I think he's even more wealthy. Him and his wife, aren't they more wealthy than even the King Charles? I think they have an exorbitant amount of. They're definitely not seen. This is what I feel like. The big money is supporting Rishi Sunak, and I feel like they're going to force him in, whether people like it or not. But I'm getting this idea of like the everyday common people are not going to be happy with this. It's going to be kind of forced on everybody, even though people see their standard of living is going down, things are getting worse. I think they're even escalating things. And maybe Rick has something to say. I think Rishi Sunak's even made some statements about, is there a possibility that they could send soldiers into Ukraine, UK. So there's definitely this sense of like Rishi Sunak is being protected by the establishment. Just like we saw in France, Macron was very disliked. You had the yellow vest movement, but they're still not able to get, Macron out of office. It's almost like they get the powers that back them and they just stay stuck.
Well, as we get ready to wrap up this whole thing, as the host, I'm going to take the last word on all of this. As we talk about what Thor just said, let's recap. An unpopular candidate who happens to have a lot of money is suddenly elected and feels like he's been forced down the throats of voters. Now, you tell me what that sounds like. Ponder that one until next week. My thanks to the panel who've done a great job, as always. Annabelle, Rick Paul, and Thor Sandalwood. We'll reconvene next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Pacific, 6 o'clock in London time. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and be a part of the conversation as well. You can chime in anytime. Little vignettes will be popping up during the week as stories break. Annabelle will be leading the charge on that. And with that being said, we are out of time. So, guys, see you all next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. That's
Thanks,
what I like
Rob.
to hear.
Take
With
care.
that in mind, we'll see you in the future.